At our family dinner, my aunt whispered, "Your inheritance was stolen by your brother." His betrayal broke my trust, but I turned the tables with a shocking revelation. I'm Patricia, 60, from Fredericksburg, Virginia, the one who held our family together, managing our parents' estate while my brother took advantage. That night, when Aunt Margaret exposed his theft, my world shattered. I fought back, exposing his lies to reclaim my peace. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story and comment your city to show me how far it reaches. If you've ever faced family betrayal, hit subscribe and share below. Our family home in Fredericksburg, Virginia was a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, the kind of place where neighbors stopped by with pies and kids played tag in the yard. My parents had built it with love, and after they passed a decade ago, I took on managing their estate, stocks, savings, and the house itself. It was my way of honoring them, keeping our family rooted. My husband, Edward Nelson, a retired history teacher, supported me, his steady presence a comfort after 38 years of marriage. My older brother, Robert Nelson, 3 years my senior, ran a failing real estate business, always chasing deals that never panned out. His wife, Diane Nelson, kept up appearances, hosting book clubs and church events to mask their financial strain. My niece, Susan, their daughter, was a free spirit, drifting between jobs. From the outside, we were a classic American family. Sunday dinners, Thanksgiving feasts, summer barbecues at the lake, but beneath it, tensions simmered. Growing up, I was the responsible one, balancing checkbooks for Mom while Robert dreamed of quick riches. If he forgot his part in the school play, I'd rehearse with him. If Susan needed a ride to art class, I'd drop everything. "You're our rock, Patricia," Dad would say, his eyes warm. But Robert leaned on me too much. After college, I became a certified public accountant, working long hours to build a stable career before retiring at 55. Robert, meanwhile, sank money into risky ventures, a strip mall that flopped, a condo project that stalled, a tech startup that crashed in 6 months. Each failure ended with him asking for loans from the family estate, promising to repay when his next deal hit big. "He's got vision," Diane would say, her smile tight as she defended him. When the estate's funds dipped, he'd turn to me, his pitches desperate but convincing. I'd transfer thousands, 10,000, 15,000, believing family helped family. Susan was less overt, but just as draining. She'd borrow for emergencies, rent, car repairs, a new laptop for her freelance design that never materialized. Diane and Robert excused her. "Susan's finding her path," they'd say, dipping into the estate for her too. I managed every transaction, ensuring the family's legacy stayed intact, but the pressure grew. By my 50s, I'd given Robert over $60,000, none repaid. I'd covered Susan's bills countless times, and even bailed out Diane when their mortgage lagged, all while maintaining our home and Edward's medical bills from a heart scare. The resentment built slowly. Each call from Robert, "Just a small loan, Patricia," felt heavier. I'd lie awake, wondering why I was the only one sacrificing. But Mom's voice echoed, "Family sticks together." Edward saw it early. 2 years ago, after I wired Robert $5,000 for a surefire deal, Edward said, "Patricia, they're bleeding you dry. When do you get to say no?" His voice held quiet anger, his blue eyes sharp with concern. I brushed it off. "They'd do the same for us." He shook his head. Would they? His family was different, self-sufficient, their gatherings about shared meals, not shared debts. Still, I hoped Robert would turn things around, that Diane would stop enabling, that Susan would settle down. When Edward and I planned a family dinner last fall to celebrate our 38th anniversary, I thought it could be a fresh start. I spent days preparing roast chicken, mashed potatoes, pecan pie, imagining laughter, toasts, a moment to feel whole. I bought gifts, a leather planner for Robert to organize his deals, a sketchbook for Susan's art, a scarf for Diane. I pictured Aunt Margaret and Uncle Richard, our family elders, beaming with pride. Work had slowed since I retired, but I was busier than ever managing the estate. It was complex. Stocks, bonds, a trust fund, and the house, all meant to secure our future. Robert, however, saw it as his personal bank. Just a little to tide me over, he'd say, his charm masking desperation. Diane backed him, saying he's protecting our legacy. Their excuses hid a deeper truth. Robert's business was drowning in debt, and Diane's social status depended on pretending otherwise. 3 weeks before the dinner, I called Diane to coordinate. "No need to help, Patricia," she said, her voice oddly sharp. "We've got it covered." That was strange. I'd always organized family events, from Christmas to reunions. "I can bring dessert," I offered. "We're fine," she snapped, then softened. "Busy with church stuff. Just come Sunday." I called Robert next. "You coming to the dinner?" I asked. "Yeah, Sunday," he mumbled. "Got a meeting, but I'll be there." His vagueness raised flags. Susan was evasive too. "Might ride with Mom," she said, though she lived across town. A week before, I stopped by their house with homemade cookies, a gesture to share my excitement. Robert was in the garage, slamming the door shut. I glimpsed folders and a laptop. "Patricia," he said, too loud, "didn't expect you." "What's with the folders?" I asked. "Just business stuff," he said, staring me inside. Their house was spotless, unlike their usual clutter before family events. A bank statement peeked from under a magazine, but Diane whisked it away. "Spring cleaning," she said, her smile forced. As I left, I overheard Robert on the phone. "Patricia was here. No, she doesn't know." That night, I told Edward, my stomach tight, "Something's off, Edward. They're hiding something." He frowned, his jaw set. "I've never trusted Robert's money games," he said, his voice low with frustration. "Be careful, Patricia." I checked Robert's social media, silent for weeks. Susan posted vague photos of documents, captioned "big changes." 3 days before the dinner, Diane texted the family, "Dinner at 6 p.m. Sunday, bring your appetites." It calmed me briefly. I was overthinking, letting old resentments cloud my judgment. Sunday arrived, the dining room warm with candlelight, our oak table set with Mom's china. Edward sat at the head, his silver hair catching the glow, but his eyes were distant, wary of Robert. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Richard arrived, their presence grounding. Laura, my cousin, chatted about her kids. Susan was late, rushing in with apologies. Robert and Diane sat across from me, Diane's smile tight, Robert avoiding my gaze. The tension was palpable, like a storm brewing. "This looks amazing, Patricia," Laura said, gesturing to the spread. I smiled, but the food tasted flat. Aunt Margaret, always sharp, watched Robert closely, her eyes narrowing. As we passed the potatoes, Margaret leaned in, her voice low. "Patricia, your inheritance, it's been stolen by Robert." The words hit like a slap. Edward froze, his fork clattering. Susan gasped, Diane looked away, and Robert's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. Margaret's eyes were steady. "He's been siphoning the estate for years, using it to cover his debts." The room spun. Robert stammered, "That's ridiculous, Margaret." But his guilt was clear. Edward's hand found mine under the table, his grip tight with anger. "Is it true?" I asked Robert. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The dinner I'd planned for Unity was unraveling, and I knew nothing would be the same. The dinner left me reeling, Aunt Margaret's words echoing in my head. "Your inheritance was stolen by your brother." Edward drove us home in silence, his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw clenched with anger. "I always knew Robert was trouble," he said finally, his voice low but sharp. But this? Stealing from you? I stared out the window, my heart pounding. I need to know how far it goes, I said. I can't let this destroy us. Edward reached for my hand, his touch steady. Whatever you do, I'm with you, Patricia. We'll figure it out. His support grounded me, but the betrayal cut deep. That night, I barely slept, replaying Robert's guilty expression, Diane's avoidance, Susan's shock. Had they all known? Was the family I'd fought to preserve built on lies? The next morning, I moved through our routine like a ghost, coffee brewing, toast for Edward, but my mind was elsewhere. Robert had always been charming, quick with excuses, but stealing from the estate, that was a new low. Diane's insistence on family legacy felt hollow now, a cover for their crumbling finances. I needed proof. After Edward left for his weekly book club, I headed to the study where I kept the estate's records. The room was my sanctuary, lined with files and ledgers from decades of careful management. My hand shook as I opened the cabinet, pulling out bank statements for the family trust. Most were routine, dividends, property taxes, but one account caught my eye. A separate savings account, one I hadn't authorized, with Robert's name as co-signer. Large withdrawals, $10,000, $20,000, $35,000, stretched back years, always in cash, always unexplained. My breath caught. This wasn't a mistake. I photographed the statements, my fingers trembling so much I needed multiple shots. Why hadn't I noticed? I trusted Robert, assumed his loans were temporary, but this was theft, deliberate and sustained. I returned the files, my mind racing. The phone rang, jarring me. It was Susan, her voice shaky. "Aunt Patricia, I didn't know," she said. "I swear, I thought Dad's deals were legit." "Then why didn't you say anything last night?" I asked. She hesitated. "Mom said not to upset you. She said Dad was handling things." "Handling things?" I snapped. "By stealing from me?" Susan went quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll talk to him." Her apology felt sincere, but it didn't erase the hurt. Diane's influence was clear. She'd been shielding Robert, keeping up their perfect image. That afternoon, Diane's car pulled into our driveway. She walked toward the backyard, where James Carter, our bank's branch manager, was meeting with Robert near the garden shed. I'd seen James at community events, always professional, but his presence here was odd. I watched from the kitchen window, my pulse quickening. Diane gestured sharply, Robert's head hung low, and James looked uneasy, clutching a folder. This wasn't a casual visit. I slipped outside, staying behind the rose bushes, close enough to hear. "You need to stop this," James said, his voice tense. "The bank's asking questions about these withdrawals." Robert muttered, "I'll cover it. Just give me time." Diane cut in, "James, you promised to keep this quiet. We're family." Family? My blood boiled. They were using my trust to hide Robert's mess. Diane spotted me, her face paling. "Patricia," she called, forcing a smile. "Just discussing bank stuff." "What kind of bank stuff?" I asked, stepping forward. Robert avoided my eyes, but James shifted nervously. "Just routine account checks," he said, too quickly. "Routine?" I said, "like draining the family trust?" Robert's head snapped up. "That's not fair, Patricia. I borrowed for business." "Borrowed?" I said, my voice rising. "You stole $60,000, Robert." Diane stepped in, her voice pleading. "We were desperate, Patricia. Robert's deals fell through, and we couldn't lose the house. I thought we'd pay it back." Her admission stunned me. Desperation, not malice, but still a betrayal. James looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I should go," he said, but I stopped him. "James, did you help Robert move this money?" He hesitated, then nodded. "He said it was family business. I trusted him." Edward appeared at the back door, his face dark with anger. "Trusted him to steal from his sister?" he said, his voice cutting. "Patricia spent years keeping this family afloat, and this is how you repay her?" Diane flinched, tears in her eyes. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I was trying to save our reputation." Robert said nothing, his silence damning. I turned to Edward. "I need to see everything," I said. He nodded, his hand on my shoulder. "We'll get answers." That evening, Edward sat with me as I dug deeper into the estate's records. Hidden beneath tax documents was a folder with loan agreements in Robert's name. $45,000 from a private lender, $20,000 from a credit line, all tied to the trust. "He used my name as collateral," I said, my voice hollow. Edward's fists clenched. "He's a coward, Patricia, hiding behind you to save himself." His anger mirrored mine, but his support kept me steady. The next day, Aunt Margaret called. "I've suspected for years," she said. "Robert's been reckless, and Diane's covered for him to keep up appearances at church." Her voice softened. "I should have told you sooner, but I hoped he'd stop." Her honesty hurt, but it fueled my resolve. I met David Brooks, our financial advisor, who confirmed the damage. "Robert's withdrawals have gutted the trust," he said. "Over $70,000, maybe more, funneled to his accounts." "Can we trace it?" I asked. David nodded. "With time, yes, but confronting him now is key." Edward, sitting beside me, said, "He needs to face this, Patricia. No more excuses." His protectiveness was fierce, his eyes burning with frustration at Robert's betrayal. Robert's calls started that week, each one a mix of defensiveness and charm. "It was a loan, Patricia," he said in one voicemail. "I'll pay it back when my next deal closes." Diane texted, "Don't tear the family apart." We were desperate. Susan reached out too, her voice tearful. "I didn't know the full story, Aunt Patricia. Dad said it was for business." Her words hinted at doubt, a crack in her loyalty to her parents. The pressure mounted. Aunt Margaret urged me to keep the family together, while Uncle Richard said, "Robert's always been greedy, but he's still family." Their voices blurred into a chorus of guilt, but I wasn't backing down. I needed more proof. One morning, while Edward was at the library, I searched Robert's old room where he'd stayed during family visits. In a drawer, under old receipts, I found a notebook in his handwriting. Account numbers, transfer dates, amounts, $15,000, $30,000, $10,000. A list of thefts meticulously recorded as if he was proud. My heart sank, but my resolve hardened. This wasn't just carelessness, it was calculated. I photographed every page, my hands steady now. When Edward returned, I showed him. "He's been playing us for years," he said, his voice thick with disgust. "What's your next move?" "I confront him," I said, "but not alone. I want the family there." I called Diane, keeping my tone neutral. "Let's have another dinner Sunday," I said, "to clear the air." She hesitated, then agreed. "Robert wants to explain," she said, her voice shaky. "We'll make this right." Her promise felt empty, but I needed them in one room. Edward frowned when I told him. "They'll try to manipulate you," he warned, his eyes searching mine. "I've seen Robert twist things before." "I know," I said, squeezing his hand, "but I have proof now. They can't dodge this." His nod was firm, but his worry lingered. "I'll be right beside you," he said, his voice steady but fierce. The week dragged, each day heavy with anticipation. I reviewed the notebook again, cross-referencing with David's findings. The total was worse than I thought. $80,000 drained from the trust, funneled to Robert's failing ventures and personal accounts. Diane's desperation to save face had enabled him, and the family's silence had let it fester. Susan's call came Friday. "I found some of Dad's papers," she said, her voice trembling. "He lied to Mom, too. I'm so sorry. Her confession was a small light in the dark, hinting at a chance for healing. I prepared for Sunday, knowing it would be a reckoning. The family I'd fought for was fractured, but I'd face it head on, with Edward by my side and the truth in my hands. The notebook I found in Robert's old room burned in my hands, its pages a ledger of betrayal, $80,000 stolen from our family's trust. Diane's excuses, Robert's silence, and Susan's tearful apology only deepened my resolve. I planned a second dinner, not for unity, but for truth. Edward was wary, his eyes dark with worry. "They'll twist this, Patricia," he said, his voice tight. "Robert's always dodged accountability." "Not this time," I replied, clutching the notebook's photos. "I have proof." Edward pulled me close, his anger softening into support. "I'm with you," he said, "but it's going to hurt." I nodded, knowing he was right, but determined to end the lies. I spent days preparing, every detail deliberate. Mom's roast beef recipe, homemade rolls, apple tart, a mirror of our last disastrous dinner. I invited Robert, Diane, Susan, Aunt Margaret, Uncle Richard, and Laura, keeping my tone warm to mask my intent. "Sunday at 6, I told Diane over the phone. She hesitated, then said, "Robert wants to fix this. We'll be there." Her voice shook, hinting at guilt. Edward helped set the table, his hands steady but his jaw tight. "I hate that he did this to you," he said, arranging Mom's china. "I've watched you carry this family for years." His words fueled me, his loyalty a shield against what was coming. Sunday arrived, the dining room glowing with candlelight, the air heavy with anticipation. Robert sat across from me, his charm forced, Diane fidgeting behind him. Susan avoided my gaze, her hands twisting in her lap. Aunt Margaret watched with sharp eyes, Uncle Richard made small talk, and Laura chatted about her kids, oblivious to the tension. "This smells amazing, Patricia," Laura said, breaking the silence. I smiled, but my heart raced. Edward squeezed my hand under the table, his presence steadying me. As we passed the rolls, I took a breath. "I've been thinking about family," I said, my voice calm. "About trust, legacy, and what we owe each other." Robert's fork stilled, Diane's eyes darted to him, and Susan looked up, wary. "Last week, Aunt Margaret said something that changed everything," I continued, locking eyes with Robert. "She said you stole my inheritance, Robert, our parents' trust." The room froze. Diane gasped, "Patricia, don't do this." Robert leaned back, his face pale. "That's absurd," he said, but his voice cracked. I pulled the notebook's photos from an envelope, placing them on the table. "This says otherwise," I said. "Account numbers, transfers, $80,000, gone." Susan's eyes widened, scanning the pages. "Dad?" she whispered. Diane reached for her hand, but Susan pulled away. "Is this true?" Edward's voice cut through, sharp with anger. "You used her, Robert, while she kept this family together." Robert stammered. "It was a loan, Patricia, for business. I was going to pay it back." "A loan?" I said, my voice rising. "You forged my signature, used my name as collateral? That's theft." Diane's tears spilled over. "We were desperate," she said, her voice breaking. "The business was failing, and we couldn't lose everything. I thought we'd fix it before you found out." Her admission was raw, exposing her fear of their crumbling facade. Susan shook her head, tears falling. "You lied to me too, Mom. You said Dad's deals were legit." Robert looked away, his charm gone. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he muttered. "I was trying to save us." "Save us?" I said, my anger flaring. "You stole from our parents' legacy, from me, from Susan's future." Edward leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "You let Patricia carry the weight of this family while you gambled it away. You don't get to call that saving. Aunt Margaret nodded, her voice steady. I've watched you dodge responsibility for years, Robert. This ends now. Uncle Richard shifted uncomfortably, but Laura spoke up. Patricia, we didn't know, I swear. Her sincerity softened me, but I stayed focused. I trusted you, Robert, I said. We all did. But this stops here. The table was silent, the weight of truth suffocating. Diane broke the quiet, her voice trembling. I enabled him, Patricia. I was scared of losing our place in this town, of people seeing us fail. I pushed Robert to keep trying, even when I knew it was wrong. Her confession stunned me, a crack in her polished armor. Susan reached for her mother's hand now, her eyes conflicted. I should have questioned Dad, she said softly. I saw the money, the trips, but I believed their excuses. Their words were a start, but the pain lingered. I stood, placing the photos in front of Robert. You need to make this right, I said, not just with money, but with honesty. He nodded, his face crumpling, the first sign of real remorse. The dinner ended in tense silence. Robert and Diane left without a word, Susan trailing behind, her expression torn. Aunt Margaret hugged me, whispering, "You did what I couldn't." Edward stayed by my side, his arm around me as we cleared the table. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice thick, but I hate how much this hurt you. I leaned into him, exhausted but resolute. It's not over, I said, but it's a start. The next week, Robert called, his voice heavy. I'm getting help, he said. A financial counselor. I'll pay back what I can. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Diane sent a letter, her words raw. I was wrong to hide his mistakes. I'm sorry, Patricia. I want to rebuild. Susan visited, her apology deeper. I was blind to Dad's lies, she said, tears falling. I want to be better, for you, for us. Her sincerity moved me, a bridge to healing. With David Brooks, our financial advisor, I began untangling the damage. The trust is salvageable, he said, but it'll take years to rebuild. I closed Robert's unauthorized accounts, froze the trust, and set new safeguards. Each step felt like reclaiming my parents' legacy. Edward was there through it all, his anger at Robert balanced by his care for me. You're stronger than they deserve, he said one night, his voice soft but fierce. You've always been our anchor. His words healed something in me, reminding me I wasn't alone. By spring, we hosted a small Easter gathering, not with Robert's family, but with Laura, Aunt Margaret, Uncle Richard, and new friends from Edward's book club. The house filled with laughter, shared stories, and a potluck of mismatched dishes. Laura's cornbread, Margaret's deviled eggs. Susan showed up, uninvited but welcome, bringing a homemade pie. I'm trying, Aunt Patricia, she said, her eyes earnest. I want to earn your trust. I hugged her, feeling a flicker of hope. Robert and Diane were absent, working through their debts with a counselor. Margaret told me, Robert's selling his business. Diane's taken a part-time job. They're changing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. A year after that dinner, Edward and I sat in our garden, the roses blooming under my care. Any regrets? He asked, his hand warm in mine. I thought of Robert's betrayal, Diane's enabling, Susan's growth. Only that I trusted too long, I said, but I found my strength. He smiled, his eyes soft. You saved us, Patricia. Not just the money, but our family. The journey wasn't easy, but it taught me truth is stronger than lies, and love, real love, requires honesty, not sacrifice. Have you ever faced a family betrayal that changed everything? Share your story below. Like and subscribe for more tales of finding strength through pain. Thanks for being here. Here's to building trust that lasts.